Her scream ripped through the quiet like glass shattering. The front door slammed against the wall as Karen stormed inside, pointing a finger at my wife, 8 months pregnant, frozen in the middle of her livestream yoga class. "You can't broadcast this from your living room. It violates HOA policy," she spat, her voice carrying straight into the microphone. Hundreds of stunned viewers watched in real time as my wife clutched her belly, terrified, and I realized this nightmare was unfolding live before the world. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. My name doesn't matter as much as the role I've been forced into. I never imagined myself as the kind of man who would have to defend his family in front of neighbors, lawyers, or a courtroom. But here I am, telling this story because someone in a position of petty power decided to step over every line of decency. I'm a software engineer by trade. My world is usually numbers, code, and quiet hours at a desk. I like solving puzzles, making things work that seem broken. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop. I've never been in a fistfight in my life. But what I do have are two things that became weapons when Karen started her crusade: a mind that doesn't let go of problems, and a family that I would burn the world to protect. My wife is my heart. She's the reason I get up in the morning and the reason I stay grounded when work gets overwhelming. Before the chaos, she built something beautiful out of nothing, a live yoga channel that reached thousands of people across the country. Her calm voice, her slow movements, her ability to turn stress into stillness, it was her gift to the world, and people loved her for it. The live streams became her way of staying healthy during pregnancy, and they connected her to a community of strangers who became supporters, friends, almost like family. We moved into this neighborhood because we thought it was safe. Clean streets, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes without fear, the kind of place where you imagine trick-or-treating every Halloween and block parties in the summer. We saved for years to afford the down payment. It wasn't just an investment, it was a promise. A place where we could raise our child without the noise of the city, without the dangers that kept us awake at night in our old apartment. But I grew up with a lesson branded into me: peace isn't free. My dad, a firefighter, taught me that when there's smoke, you run toward it, not away. My mom, a nurse, showed me that helping people often means standing firm even when it hurts. I watched both of them sacrifice their bodies, their time, their peace, for the sake of others. That blood runs in me, and maybe that's why I couldn't just roll over when the HOA, led by one woman with too much time and too little empathy, decided to target us. At first, I tried to ignore her. I told myself, keep your head down, follow the rules, it'll blow over. But then the letters started. Notices about violations that weren't real. Accusations of us disturbing the peace when the loudest thing in our house was a teapot whistling, and slowly, it shifted from irritation to fear. Not for me, I can handle stress, but for my wife, pregnant and vulnerable, and for the little life we were both counting down the weeks to meet. I didn't want conflict, I wanted quiet. But when someone makes your home feel unsafe, when someone stalks your every move and twists rules into weapons, you either submit or you fight. And for me, there was no choice. My wife's health was already fragile from complications. The stress alone could have hurt her. The idea that this self-proclaimed enforcer of HOA order could make her cry, lose sleep, feel unsafe in her own living room, that was the line. Every ounce of me, the kid who grew up learning resilience, the husband who promised to protect, the father-to-be who would give anything for his unborn child, all of that turned into fuel. I couldn't swing fists, but I could document. I couldn't intimidate, but I could outthink. I couldn't stop her from coming at us, but I could make sure every strike she threw left a mark that would one day come back on her. That's why I fight. Not because I like it, not because I want to, but because when you mess with my family, you wake up something in me you won't know how to put back to sleep. And if Karen thought I would just roll over, she had no idea who she was dealing with. If Karen's story had started with that break-in, maybe people would think it was a one-time explosion, a moment of madness, a mistake she regretted afterward. But the truth is, what happened that day was just the climax of a long, carefully laid pattern. Karen was the kind of neighbor you notice immediately, not because she's warm, not because she smiles, but because she watches, always watching. The first time I saw her, she was standing in the cul-de-sac at 6 in the morning holding a clipboard, eyes darting from house to house, as if she was conducting military inspections. It wasn't paranoia on my part. She was taking notes. At first it seemed harmless, annoying, sure. A middle-aged woman with too much time on her hands, hovering around like she owned the neighborhood. But then came the notices. The very first one was almost laughable. Improper lawn maintenance. Grass exceeds HOA height requirements. My grass was maybe 3 inches tall. I mow every week. But there it was. A printed notice taped to our door, with Karen's signature scribbled at the bottom. When I brought it up at the next HOA board meeting, she just smiled with that tight, condescending smirk and said, "Rules are rules." The second strike came when my wife placed a small welcome mat outside. Nothing flashy, just a plain brown mat with the word "A Home" etched into it. A week later, another notice appeared. Unauthorized exterior decoration. Violates uniform entryway code. It became clear that Karen's enforcement wasn't about rules. It was about control. She didn't target everyone equally. Some neighbors got away with loud pool parties until midnight. Others left garbage bins out for days without a peep from the board. But us? We couldn't breathe without her filing a complaint. And she made it personal. When Amazon delivered a package to our porch, Karen snapped a photo of it, emailed the HOA listserv, and wrote, "Improper parcel visibility. Packages must not remain outside more than 30 minutes." She'd waited, stopwatch in hand, as if daring us to violate her made-up timeline. I thought it was harassment, but my wife, she thought it was something darker. She told me once in a shaky voice that she caught Karen staring through our window during one of her Livestream yoga sessions. Not from the sidewalk, but leaning over the hedge like a thief. And Karen didn't stop there. She wove herself into every aspect of community life. One evening, when neighbors gathered for a block BBQ, Karen walked from table to table with her clipboard, not to join in, but to take notes on which grills were approved by HOA standards and which lawn chairs weren't. She'd make casual comments, her voice sugary sweet. "Oh, I see you have 3 cars parked in the driveway. Interesting. You know the limit is 2. Or, your daughter's bike is left in the yard. Technically, that's clutter." She didn't yell, she didn't threaten, she whispered poison, planting seeds of fear. The scariest part wasn't the rules themselves. It was how she bent them to her will. One neighbor, the Johnsons, put up a small swing set for their kids. 2 weeks later, Karen forced them to tear it down for safety code violations. But when her friend across the street built an enormous pergola without a permit, Karen called it an enhancement to community aesthetics. She knew exactly when to be ruthless and when to look the other way. That's what made her dangerous. She wasn't blindly enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. And she loved the performance. At HOA board meetings, she'd sit at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, glasses perched on her nose, tapping her pen against the rules binder. Neighbors would whisper complaints, afraid to speak too loudly in case they became her next target. Once, when I pushed back against one of her ridiculous violation notices, she leaned in close and whispered, "If you don't like it, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." It wasn't just intimidation, it was eviction by 1,000 cuts. But what chilled me most was how she seemed to know when to strike. If my wife skipped a yoga class due to pregnancy fatigue, the next morning a violation would appear in our mailbox. If I worked late and forgot to roll in the trash bin until the next day, Karen had already photographed it, time-stamped, and submitted to the board. She wasn't guessing. She was watching. The pattern built like a storm. Minor harassments, notices for grass, packages, mats. Creepy intrusions, staring through windows, photographing our porch. Selective cruelty, punishing some neighbors, rewarding her favorites. Calculated timing, striking when we were most vulnerable. And she wrapped it all in the language of community standards, as if she were protecting the neighborhood rather than terrorizing it. The other neighbors noticed. You could see it in the way conversations shifted when Karen approached. Smiles faded, voices hushed, people kept their heads down. They weren't living in a community. They were living under surveillance. One neighbor confided in me, whispering so low I could barely hear, She made me repaint my house because the beige wasn't the approved beige. It cost me thousands. But when I asked the board for proof, the documents were gone. Karen had erased them. She controlled the files, the votes, the minutes. And anyone who dared challenge her risked fines, threats, or worse, public humiliation in front of the board. By the time the break-in happened, I already knew. Karen wasn't just nosy. She wasn't just strict. She was methodical. She was selective. She was dangerous. And she had chosen us as her prey. It happened on a Wednesday evening, one of those rare nights when everything felt almost normal. My wife had finished her live stream early, her belly resting heavily as she curled into the couch with a cup of chamomile tea. I was in the kitchen cleaning up dinner, humming to myself, when the knock came. Not a polite knock, not the kind of neighborly tap you'd expect. It was sharp, insistent, and it didn't stop. My stomach tightened. I opened the door, and there she was. Karen. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. Her lips curled into that smug little smile I'd come to hate. "You're in violation," she said without greeting. "Again." I blinked at her, trying to keep my voice level. "Violation of what this time?" She stepped forward as if she owned my doorstep. "Noise disturbance. Multiple neighbors complained about loud music coming from your home." "This is your second strike," I laughed, but it wasn't funny. My wife doesn't play loud music. The loudest thing in our house was her meditation playlist, soft waves and bird sounds. "There was no loud music," I told her. "You know that." Her eyes flicked past me, into the house, as if she could see my wife curled up on the couch. "We'll let the board decide," she said, then raised her phone and snapped a picture of me standing in the doorway. "For records." I shut the door on her before I said something I'd regret. But that night, the damage was done. My wife couldn't sleep. She sat up in bed, holding her stomach, whispering that she didn't feel safe. What if she comes back? What if she tries to fine us? What if she lies again and the board believes her? Her blood pressure was already high from the pregnancy complications. Stress wasn't just unpleasant, it was dangerous. And I could see the toll it was taking, her trembling hands, the way she jumped when a car door slammed outside, the tears she tried to hide. The next day, another notice appeared in our mailbox. Second official violation. Fines may apply. Continued disturbances may result in HOA disciplinary action. It wasn't just paper. It was a threat. From then on, Karen escalated. She'd park her car down the street and sit there, engine running, lights off, just watching our house. I'd pull the curtain back at midnight and see her silhouette behind the wheel. Sometimes she'd walk her dog by our house 3, 4, 5 times a day, pausing just long enough to scribble something on her clipboard. One evening, as my wife set up her yoga mat, she whispered, "I feel like we're being hunted." And she wasn't wrong. The emotional cost started to spread like cracks in glass. My wife stopped going for her evening walks around the neighborhood, too scared she'd run into Karen. She switched her yoga live streams to private recordings, terrified that Karen was somehow lurking in the chat. Even I wasn't immune. I'd sit at my desk trying to focus on work, but every sound outside, a car door, a footstep, the rustle of leaves, had me checking the window. Was she out there again? Was she writing another lie that would end up in my mailbox? The worst moment came a week later. It was Saturday afternoon. I'd just stepped outside to mow the lawn when a police car pulled into our street. My heart sank as the officer walked up the driveway. "Sir," he said carefully, "we received a noise complaint. Your neighbor reported a party, possible disturbance a party." I looked around at my empty driveway, my silent house, my wife napping inside. There was no party. There was nothing but Karen, standing across the street with her arms crossed, watching the entire scene unfold. I felt my fists clench. The officer must have seen it in my face because he held up his hands. "Look, I can see nothing's going on here, but we still have to respond when a complaint comes in." He gave me a look that said he knew exactly who had made the call. Karen smirked at me as the cruiser pulled away. No words, just that smirk. That was the first time I realized how far she was willing to go. It wasn't about notices anymore. It wasn't about rules. It was about escalation. She had crossed the line from nuisance to intimidation, and she was using the system, the HOA, the board, even the police, as her weapons. That night, my wife broke down. She sat at the kitchen table, tears spilling over, and said, "I don't feel safe here. I don't want to bring our baby into this," and that gutted me. This house was supposed to be our safe haven, the nest where we'd raise our child. But instead, it felt like a cage we were trapped in, with Karen rattling the bars whenever she pleased. I promised her I'd fix it. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing for certain. If Karen thought she could scare us into submission, she had underestimated the wrong family. Because fear can paralyze you, or it can light a fire so hot it burns away your hesitation. And in that moment, I felt the flames. The night it all came crashing down started quietly. Too quietly. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those golden hours when the light pours through the windows and makes everything feel almost safe. My wife had decided to go live for the first time in weeks. She wanted to reconnect with her yoga community, to show she was strong despite the stress, to feel normal again. She set up the tripod in the living room, positioned the mat, and began her breathing exercises. Hundreds of viewers tuned in instantly, little hearts and encouraging comments flooding the chat. For a brief moment, it felt like we had reclaimed our space. I was in the kitchen slicing fruit, listening to her soft voice echo through the house. Inhale, exhale, find your center. Then came the sound, a sharp metallic click, the sound of a lock turning. My blood ran cold. Before I could react, the front door swung open so violently it slammed against the wall. My wife gasped. The yoga mat shifted beneath her feet. And there she was, Karen. Her face was twisted, lips thin, eyes wild. She stepped into our home like she had every right, clutching her clipboard in one hand and waving a folded piece of paper in the other. "This is a community violation," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the microphone, broadcasting straight into the live stream. The chat exploded. "What's happening? Who is that?" Emojis of shock and disbelief filled the screen. My wife stumbled back, her hand flying to her stomach. She was 8 months pregnant, vulnerable, exhausted, terrified. She whispered my name, her voice trembling as Karen advanced across the living room. "You can't broadcast from inside your house without HOA approval," Karen barked, waving the paper. "This is unauthorized media production." My heart pounded. I lunged from the kitchen, positioning myself between her and my wife. "You need to leave, right now?" But Karen didn't stop. She shoved the paper in my face. "This is an official citation. You've been warned. You're disrupting community harmony. I have the right to enforce compliance." I caught a glimpse of the document. It wasn't official. It was a sheet of printer paper, filled with bullet points she had typed up herself. No signatures, no board seal. "You broke into my home," I growled. "This is trespassing." She sneered, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "No one's going to believe you. I am the board behind." My wife's yoga live stream continued. The camera lens captured everything. The open door, Karen's figure, her shrill accusations. Viewers typed frantically, "Call the police. She's trespassing. Get her out of there." Karen didn't realize she was being recorded. Or maybe she didn't care. She stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. It wasn't smug superiority. It was obsession. A hunger to dominate, to bend us until we broke. My wife let out a cry, clutching her stomach. Stress contractions. I could see the pain on her face. That was it. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and dialed 911. "There's a woman in my home who forced her way inside," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "She's refusing to leave. My wife is pregnant. We need help." Now Karen's eyes flicked to the phone, then to the tripod. For the first time, doubt crossed her face. "You think anyone's going to side with you?" she spat. "You're the troublemakers. Everyone knows it." But even as she said it, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. She froze. The live stream chat was a blur of capital letters. EVIDENCE. Record. "Everything. Don't let her leave." Karen seemed to sense the walls closing in. She spun on her heel, stormed back out the door, and disappeared down the street just as the police car rolled up. I opened the door wide, adrenaline coursing through me, as 2 officers stepped out. She forced her way in. I said immediately, pointing to the camera still recording. "We have it all on video. Hundreds of people just witnessed it live." The officer's eyes followed my finger to the tripod, the glowing phone screen, the live chat still streaming. My wife sat trembling on the couch, tears streaking her face, her hands protectively over her stomach. One of the officers nodded grimly. "We'll need that footage." And that was the moment I realized Karen had made her biggest mistake. Her intimidation, her lies, her selective cruelty, none of it mattered now, because she had crossed the threshold of our home, and in doing so, she had left behind something she couldn't control: evidence, hard, undeniable proof. That night, after the officers left and my wife was safe in bed, I sat in the glow of the laptop, replaying the footage. Karen's voice echoed through the speakers. "This is a community violation." Her face twisted in rage, the open door behind her. My wife's terrified cry, every second of it preserved. And the chat, hundreds of witnesses, time-stamped, archived, people from across the country ready to swear what they saw. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of hope. Karen thought she could break us. Instead, she broke herself. Live, on camera, in front of the very world she wanted to control. And though I didn't know it yet, that footage would become the blade that finally cut through her lies in the weeks to come. After the break-in, something inside me shifted. For months, Karen had played offense, pushing, lying, threatening, and waiting for us to fold. But now, I had something she couldn't twist. Video evidence. And not just a clip buried in my phone, a live stream. Hundreds of witnesses, time-stamped, public, permanent. That night, once my wife was calm and finally asleep, I sat at my desk and began building a case. I downloaded the live stream and backed it up in 3 places: my computer, an external drive, and the cloud. I wasn't about to let Karen lose it the way she always made HOA documents disappear. Then I started connecting the dots. I pulled up the 911 call log, simple enough to request since I was the one who made it. The timestamp read 7:42 p.m. I replayed the video. At exactly 7:42, Karen was standing in my living room, screaming about community violations. There it was. Proof she wasn't just trespassing, but lying about her authority at the very same time I was calling the police. I clipped that segment and labeled it, "Break-in, synced with 911 call." Even someone with zero tech knowledge could understand it. Side by side, the truth and her lies, perfectly aligned, but the video was only part of it. I scrolled through the livestream chat, thousands of comments, dozens of people shouting to call the cops, confirming they were watching live. I screenshotted everything, even the usernames, and emailed a few of the top commenters. Within 24 hours, replies came back. "I'll testify if needed." I saw the whole thing, start to finish. "I've already saved my own copy in case you need it." Complete strangers were willing to stand up for us. Karen thought she had isolated us. Instead, she had put herself on stage for an audience she couldn't control. A few days later, I attended the HOA meeting, the first one I'd gone to in months. My heart raced as I walked in, USB drive heavy in my pocket. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, pretending like nothing had happened. But the mood in the room was different. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Neighbors glanced at me with something I hadn't seen before. Curiosity, maybe even sympathy. I realized many of them had seen the video circulating online. Clips had already been shared, reposted, dissected. Karen was becoming a local legend, and not the flattering kind. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "I have video proof of a board member entering my home without consent while my pregnant wife was live streaming. The police were called. Hundreds of people witnessed it. I'd like to submit this as evidence." The room went silent. For the first time, I saw Karen falter. Her smile tightened. Her hands fidgeted with her pen. She muttered, "That's not relevant to board matters." But one of the other board members, a quiet man named Davis, who usually sat like a shadow, finally spoke. "If it involves criminal behavior," he said slowly, "I think it's very relevant." The whispers grew louder. Karen snapped back, "You don't understand the rules." "I am enforcing order. But the seed was planted. Someone on the inside had questioned her. After the meeting, a woman I barely knew, Mrs. Lopez from 2 doors down, pulled me aside. She glanced over her shoulder, voice low. She did the same to us, she confessed. She said our swing set was unsafe and made us tear it down. But last month, her friend put up a pergola without approval and nothing happened. I think she's protecting some people and targeting others. I nodded. If you're willing to write that down, it could help. Mrs. Lopez hesitated, then whispered, "Send me your email." One by one, over the next week, more neighbors came forward. Small things, harassment, selective enforcement, rules bent or invented, stories that mirrored ours. I started compiling them into a binder. Karen's pattern of abuse. Each page documented, dated, backed by witness accounts. By the end of the week, I had the Livestream video, Karen entering our home without permission, 911 call log, perfectly synced with the footage, witness statements from Livestream viewers confirming they saw it live, neighbor testimonies showing her selective enforcement and personal targeting, HOA meeting minutes, where at least one board member questioned her authority. It wasn't just a pile of grievances anymore. It was a case, a narrative with evidence at every step, and Karen knew it. I could see it in the way she stopped walking her dog past our house, the way she avoided eye contact at the mailbox, the way her voice shook slightly when she still tried to sound confident at the next board meeting. Her armor was cracking. For the first time, she wasn't the hunter. She was the hunted, and I was ready to deliver the final blow. The night of the showdown felt different. The HOA meeting hall was packed, standing room only. Neighbors who hadn't shown their faces in months were crammed shoulder to shoulder, whispering nervously, waiting for fireworks. Even the air felt heavy, like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath for too long. Karen sat at the head of the long folding table, her clipboard in front of her like a shield. She wore that same smug smirk she always wore, the one that said, "I'm in charge, and you can't touch me." But this time, I wasn't walking in empty-handed. I had my binder, I had my USB drive, and I had the truth. The meeting started as usual. Karen rattled off the agenda in that clipped tone she always used, pausing just long enough to intimidate anyone who dared fidget. Then she turned to violations. She tapped her pen against the table. As you all know, certain residents have been disruptive. Repeated noise disturbances, unauthorized activities, broadcasting without approval. It is the board's responsibility to enforce. These rules, no matter how unpopular, her eyes flicked toward me. A challenge. I stood slowly. My voice was calm, but my chest pounded. I'd like to respond to those accusations. Karen scoffed. Responses can be filed in writing. This is not the time. But then Davis, the quiet board member who had questioned her before, cleared his throat. I think we should hear him out. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile faltered. So, I stepped forward, plugging my USB into the projector. The screen behind me flickered to life. "Here's what happened in my home last Sunday evening," I said. The video began to play. Karen's face filled the screen, storming into our living room, waving that piece of paper, shrieking, "This is a community violation." The room gasped. My wife's frightened cry echoed through the speakers. You could see her clutching her stomach. You could hear the panic in my voice as I called 911. The footage was damning, unedited, unstoppable. Karen shot to her feet. "This is taken out of context," she shouted. "He doctored this. He's trying to frame me." But I stayed calm. "Let's check the timestamps," I said, clicking to the next slide. Side by side on the screen appeared two things, the video time code and the 911 call log, both marked 7:42 p.m., perfectly aligned. This was live, I explained. Hundreds of viewers saw it in real time. Here are statements from people across the country who witnessed it. They can testify that what you're seeing is exactly what happened. The room buzzed louder. Neighbors craned their necks to see the documents on the screen. Karen tried again. "The board rules allow—" I cut her off. My voice sharpened for the first time all night. "The board rules do not allow trespassing. The board rules do not give you authority to enter someone's home. and the board rules certainly don't allow falsifying violations and harassing residents selectively. I flipped through the binder, holding up neighbor statements. Mrs. Lopez's testimony about the swing set, the Johnson story about repainting their house, photos, emails, notices, all pointing to a pattern. "Here's the truth," I said, locking eyes with her. "You've been abusing your position, targeting families you don't like, and protecting those you do. And when that wasn't enough, you broke into my home and terrorized my pregnant wife." The room was dead silent. Then, from the back, a voice broke through. "She did the same thing to us." It was a neighbor I barely knew. Then another spoke. "She fined me for a fence that was already approved." And another. "She threatened to have us evicted over a dog that wasn't even ours." The murmurs grew into a roar, years of fear and resentment spilling out at once. People who had stayed silent finally found their voices. Karen slammed her hands on the table. "Order! Order! I am the board, president, and you will respect me." But the power in her voice was gone. No one listened. Davis rose from his chair, his face pale but determined. "Effective immediately," he said, "I motion to censure the board president for misconduct. We will hold a vote of removal." Hands shot up across the room, one after another, neighbor after neighbor, until it was unanimous. Karen's face drained of color. She sputtered, "You can't do this. You need my signature for—" "No," Davis said firmly, his voice echoing. "We don't. You're done." The crowd erupted in applause. Some people cheered. Others simply sagged in relief, like a storm had finally passed. But it wasn't just the board. The police had also been watching. The officers who'd taken my statement were waiting for this moment. After the meeting, they stepped forward, handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Karen," one of them said flatly, "you're under arrest for criminal trespass." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes went wide. "This is ridiculous. I am the law here." But as they let her out, the only sound was the heavy clap of handcuffs closing. For the first time in months, the neighborhood didn't look at her. They looked at me, my wife, my unborn child. And they looked at each other, realizing they weren't powerless after all. The tyrant of the cul-de-sac had finally fallen. And it wasn't rage or revenge that defeated her. It was proof. Calm, undeniable proof. The night Karen was arrested, the air in our house felt lighter than it had in months. My wife slept through the night for the first time in weeks, her breathing steady, her hand resting softly on her stomach. For once, she didn't jolt awake at every sound outside. For once, I didn't find myself pacing by the window, scanning the street for headlights that lingered too long. The storm had finally broken. The next morning, I stepped out into the yard just as the sun rose. The sky was washed in pink and gold, the kind of morning that makes you feel like the world is giving you a second chance. I pulled out a small tree we had bought months earlier, but never planted. A young oak. We'd been saving it for the right moment, but there had never been time, never been peace, until now. I dug into the soil, the earth cool and damp beneath my hands, and planted the tree in the corner of our yard. My wife came out with her mug of tea, smiling despite the weight of her pregnancy, and whispered, "For our baby." The oak became our symbol, roots deep, branches reaching, resilient against storms. Unlike Karen's clipboard rules, this tree was real. It grew because of care, not control. In the days that followed, something strange happened. Neighbors began talking again. For so long, people had kept their heads down, afraid to draw Karen's attention. Now, with her gone, it was like someone had opened the windows after years of stale air. People stopped by to introduce themselves, to share their stories. The Johnsons invited us over for dinner. Mrs. Lopez brought over a casserole and laughed for the first time I'd ever heard. Kids rode bikes down the street again, their laughter ringing where silence had once ruled. At the next HOA meeting, the first without Karen, the energy was completely different. Davis, now acting as interim president, called things to order. No gavel slams, no threats. Just neighbors talking like neighbors. "We need to rebuild trust," he said. "We need leadership that serves, not controls." For the first time, the board opened the floor to genuine suggestions. People spoke without fear of fines. They debated respectfully, voted fairly, and listened to each other. The community we had imagined when we moved here finally felt possible. As for our house, it no longer felt like a cage. We repainted the mailbox that Karen had once cited as too dull. This time, we painted it bright blue, cheerful, impossible to ignore. Neighbors complimented it instead of criticizing. We reopened the driveway for small gatherings. A few neighbors brought folding chairs and snacks, and we sat under string lights, swapping stories late into the night. My wife even live-streamed one of her yoga sessions outdoors, in the driveway itself. This time, the chat wasn't filled with panic. It was filled with joy, with neighbors waving to the camera, proud to be part of something healing, and no one stormed in to stop it. When the oak tree sprouted its first green shoots, I felt something inside me sprout too. The fear that had kept us tight and coiled began to loosen. My wife glowed with relief. And though she still carried the scars of those stressful months, she also carried hope. The baby was due soon, and now we could finally imagine bringing our child into this neighborhood without dread. The community wasn't perfect, no neighborhood is, but it was ours again, and it belonged to the people, not to one woman's obsession with control. Looking back, I realized something. Karen never truly had power. She had fear of being challenged, fear of losing control, fear that someone would finally call her out. And fear only works as long as everyone stays silent. The moment we stood up, the moment we showed proof, the illusion shattered. What really keeps a community strong isn't rules written in a binder. It's neighbors standing together, looking out for each other, protecting what matters most. If you've ever felt trapped by someone in power, if you've ever been silenced by fear, remember this. The truth is stronger than intimidation. And when you find your voice, you might just find others joining you. For us, it took a live stream, a broken lock, and a neighborhood's breaking point. But in the end, we didn't just win against Karen. We reclaimed our home, our peace, and our future. Now, every time I water that young oak tree, I remember the night we decided fear wouldn't rule us anymore. And if you've ever had an HOA abuse power, subscribe now and share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and your voice might be the one that finally changes everything.